He came to dinner with all the power in the room, money, status, and a sense of control that few ever question. To him it was just another night, another steak, another waitress serving his table. But for her, every step toward him carried the weight of history, silence, and unseen battles. And when she slipped him that folded note, his confident world stopped cold. What could a few handwritten words do to shake a billionaire? And why did it matter so much that he couldn't ignore it? This isn't just a story about dinner. It's about truth, power, and a note that refused to stay hidden. It was supposed to be just another evening at the restaurant. The hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft shuffle of footsteps across polished floors. It was all routine for Maya. She'd been working here for months, balancing long hours with dreams bigger than the tips she carried home. Serving wealthy guests was nothing new, but she had learned to recognize the subtle looks, the dismissive tones, and the quiet reminders of where some believed she belonged. Still, she kept her smile steady, her hands steady, and her spirit steady. Tonight seemed no different, until the corner table was reserved for a man whose reputation filled the room before he even arrived. A billionaire, powerful, untouchable. For most, it was just another customer. But for Maya, something about this night felt heavier. She didn't know why, but she was about to find out. Maya moved quickly between tables, balancing trays heavy, with plates and glasses. The restaurant buzzed with its usual rhythm, but her eyes kept drifting back to the corner booth. The billionaire had arrived, his suit sharp, his voice commanding, his presence impossible to ignore. His table was filled with quiet laughter and whispered conversations, yet his every word cut through the air like a blade. When Maya approached, she could feel it before she even heard it. The subtle pause in his gaze, the way he looked her over, not as a professional doing her job, but as if she were somehow beneath the polished floors she walked on. He ordered without looking at her, his voice sharp and dismissive. To him, she wasn't a person, just another faceless server carrying plates. She'd dealt with this before. The stares, the assumptions, the tone that said more than the words themselves. But something about this table was different. Each time she returned, his remarks grew bolder, his laughter colder. At one point, as she cleared a glass, he leaned back and said loudly enough for others to hear, "Funny, isn't it? How far this place has come, hiring anyone these days." His friends chuckled quietly, pretending not to notice the sting. In his words, Maya's chest tightened. She felt the heat rise in her face, but she swallowed hard, refusing to let it spill. She had been trained to remain calm, to smile through discomfort, and to survive nights like these. Yet with every passing moment, the weight of his presence pressed harder against her spirit. The tension stretched into every second she stood near his table. When she delivered his steak, perfectly cooked and plated, he barely glanced at her. Instead, he muttered something under his breath, shaking his head. Maya caught fragments, words she'd heard too many times in too many places. Words meant to remind her of where she was supposed to stand. But Maya didn't flinch, not this time. Beneath her uniform, her hand gripped a small folded piece of paper. She had written it earlier that day, unsure if she would ever find the courage to give it to someone. A note that wasn't just words on paper, it was truth, unspoken, but burning inside her, waiting for a moment like this. Her heart pounded as she passed his table again. Every instinct told her to leave it, to walk away, to swallow the silence like she always had. But tonight felt different. His arrogance, his laughter, his cruel dismissal, it cracked something inside her that had been held together for too long. So when the moment came, she slipped the note beside his glass, her fingers trembling just slightly before pulling away. He didn't notice at first. He was too busy talking, too busy performing his dominance for the table. But then his eyes caught the folded paper. He frowned, curiosity breaking through his confidence. He picked it up slowly, as if the weight of those small lines of ink could mean more than he expected. The laughter at the table dulled. Maya turned her back, walking away with her heart racing. She knew she had crossed an invisible line, one that could cost her everything. But she also knew there was no turning back, because inside that folded note was something that would silence the room, something no billionaire could simply laugh away. The billionaire's hand unfolded the note slowly, his brow furrowing as his eyes traced the words. At first there was silence, an almost unbearable stillness that cut through the laughter around him. Then his face stiffened. The confidence, the smirk, the arrogance, gone in an instant. His jaw tightened, his hand frozen on the paper as if the ink itself carried more weight than he could bear. The note wasn't long, just a few sentences written with a trembling but unshakable truth. Words that spoke of the things he pretended not to see, the way he treated her, the way people like him treated people like her, and the generations of pain behind every dismissive glance and cruel remark. It was not an attack. It was a mirror. And for the first time he was forced to look at himself. Whispers began to ripple through the restaurant. His friends noticed his silence and the way his hands shook slightly as he held the slip of paper. Diners nearby leaned in, sensing something had shifted, something heavy hanging in the air. Maya, standing across the room, felt her chest tighten. She didn't know if he would explode in anger, call the manager, or humiliate her in front of everyone, and then it happened. He slammed the note down onto the table, his face red with something between rage and shame. His voice, normally so steady, cracked as he barked her name loud enough for the entire room to hear. Forks clattered, conversations stopped, and all eyes turned toward Maya. In that instant she stood exposed, every fear she had carried about speaking up suddenly real. The billionaire's gaze locked on her, burning with the fury of a man unaccustomed to being challenged. The room seemed to close in. Would this be the end of her job? The end of her safety? Or could it be the beginning of something greater? Because the next words out of his mouth would not just define that night. They would decide what everyone in that room chose to see or chose to ignore. The room stayed frozen, every eye shifting between Maya and the billionaire who held her note, like it was fire in his hand. For a long, unbearable moment no one moved. Then he lowered his gaze. The man who had walked in untouchable, untamed, suddenly seemed smaller beneath the weight of her truth. His friends fidgeted uncomfortably, diners whispered, but Maya stood rooted, steady, refusing to look away. She didn't lose her voice that night. She didn't run, and she didn't apologize. Instead, she let the silence speak for her. A silence that reminded everyone in that room that dignity doesn't need permission, and truth doesn't bow to money. Eventually, he pushed his chair back, muttered something no one cared to catch, and left the restaurant without finishing his meal. For once, it wasn't Maya who carried the shame out the door, but the impact didn't end there. For Maya, it wasn't just about one note or one man. It was about every unspoken moment before, every time she had been told with a look or a word that she didn't belong. And for those who witnessed it, the scene etched itself into memory. The quiet courage of a woman refusing to stay silent, the uncomfortable truth of power confronted. Because that's the reality. Racism doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in jokes, in dismissive glances, and in the comfort of people who think their power protects them. But every act of silence broken, every truth spoken, chips away at that comfort. So the question lingers. How many more times will voices like Maya's be ignored before they're finally heard? And when it happens again, and it will we turn away or will we listen?